In the years leading up to the Second World War, Europe was changing rapidly. New weapons were being developed, and warfare was becoming more mechanized than ever before. Tanks were no longer rare machines. They were becoming the backbone of modern armies. Britain, like many other nations, realized that its infantry needed a way to stop enemy tanks without relying only on artillery. During the mid-1930s, British military planners became worried. Intelligence reports showed that Germany and other nations were investing heavily in armored vehicles. At that time, British infantry units had very limited tools to fight tanks at close range. Heavy artillery was not always available, and traditional rifles were useless against armor. This concern led to the idea of creating a weapon that an infantry soldier could carry and use against light armored vehicles. The goal was simple but ambitious: design a rifle powerful enough to penetrate tank armor, yet small enough to be handled by soldiers in the field. The result of this effort was the Boys anti-tank rifle. Manufacturing of the Boys rifle began in Britain in the late 1930s. The weapon was officially adopted in 1937. It was named after Captain Henry C. Boys, a British officer who was involved in its early development and testing. Sadly, Captain Boys passed away before the rifle was officially adopted, but his name lived on through the weapon. The rifle was produced mainly at the Royal Small Arms Factory in Enfield, one of Britain's most important weapons manufacturing centers. Additional production later took place in Canada when the war expanded and demand increased. The Boys rifle was built with strength as the top priority. Almost every part of it was heavy and solid. The long barrel, thick steel receiver, and reinforced bolt system were designed to handle extremely powerful ammunition. This made the rifle durable, but also very heavy. The ammunition used by the Boys rifle was specially developed. It fired a .55 caliber round, much larger and more powerful than standard infantry rifle ammunition. These rounds were designed to punch through metal armor rather than flesh. From the very beginning, the Boys rifle was seen as a temporary solution. Military designers understood that tanks would continue to improve, but they hoped the weapon would be effective long enough to help Britain survive the early years of the war. The Boys anti-tank rifle did not appear out of nowhere. It was the product of a specific military need and a specific moment in history. Captain Henry C. Boys was a member of the British Small Arms Committee. This committee was responsible for evaluating new weapons and improving existing ones. During testing of anti-tank rifles in the early 1930s, Captain Boys contributed ideas related to recoil reduction and structural strength. Although he did not single-handedly design the rifle, his contributions were important enough that the weapon was named in his honor. This was unusual and showed how much respect the British Army had for his work. The need for the Boys rifle came from lessons learned after World War I during that conflict. Tanks were slow and lightly armored. Infantry could sometimes disable them with grenades or field guns, but by the 1930s, tanks were faster, better protected, and more numerous. Britain feared that if war broke out again, enemy tanks could break through defensive lines quickly. Infantry units needed a weapon they could deploy immediately. Without waiting for artillery support, the Boys rifle was meant to fill this gap. It was not intended to destroy heavy tanks. Instead, it was designed to stop light tanks, armored cars, and supply vehicles. Even damaging tracks or engines could be enough to halt an enemy advance. Military planners believed that even if the rifle only worked for a few years, it would still be valuable. At that time, there were no better infantry anti-tank weapons available. The Boys anti-tank rifle was massive compared to standard rifles. It was over 5 feet long and weighed more than 16 kilograms when loaded. This made it one of the heaviest rifles ever issued to infantry soldiers. The rifle used a bolt action system. After each shot, the soldier had to manually cycle the bolt to load the next round. The magazine was mounted on top of the rifle and usually held 5 rounds. One of the most noticeable features was the large muzzle brake at the end of the barrel. This device redirected gas sideways to reduce recoil. Without it, the recoil would have been unbearable. Even with the muzzle brake, firing the Boys rifle was extremely uncomfortable. Soldiers often described the recoil as violent. Shoulder injuries were common, especially during training. To help manage this, the rifle was equipped with a thick rubber recoil pad at the rear. A bipod was attached near the front, allowing the rifle to be fired from a prone position. The sights were simple but effective. They allowed soldiers to aim accurately at armored targets at short to medium distances. Effective range was usually less than 300 meters. The ammunition was the heart of the weapon. Early versions used steel-cord armor-piercing rounds. Later versions included tungsten-cord rounds, which improved penetration. At close range, the Boys rifle could penetrate the armor of early German light tanks. However, its effectiveness dropped sharply as range increased. When World War II began in 1939, the Boys anti-tank rifle was one of the few anti-tank weapons available to British infantry. It was issued widely and became a standard part of infantry units. During the early campaigns in France and Belgium, British soldiers used the Boys rifle against German armored vehicles. In some cases, it performed well. Light tanks and armored cars could be disabled or destroyed, however. Problems quickly became apparent. German tanks were improving rapidly. Armor thickness increased and many vehicles became immune to the rifle's fire. The rifle was also difficult to move. Its weight made it hard to carry during retreats or rapid advances. Soldiers often needed 2 men to transport and operate it effectively. Despite these issues, the boy's rifle was used extensively during the evacuation from Dunkirk. British troops relied on it to delay German armored units and protect retreating forces. The boy's anti-tank rifle saw action in many parts of the world in North Africa. British and Commonwealth forces used it against Italian armored vehicles. In this environment, the rifle was more effective because Italian tanks were lightly armored. Many Italian vehicles were knocked out by boy's rifle fire. In Finland, the rifle gained a surprising reputation during the Winter War against the Soviet Union. Finnish soldiers used captured or supplied boy's rifles to great effect. Soviet light tanks were vulnerable, and Finnish troops used the rifle with skill and patience. The weapon was also used by Canadian forces, Polish units, and other Allied troops. In the Pacific theater, it was sometimes used against Japanese armored vehicles and fortified positions. However, by 1942, it became clear that the boy's rifle was becoming obsolete. Tanks were simply too well protected in combat. Using the boy's rifle required planning and bravery. Soldiers could not simply stand and fire it. They usually lay prone, hidden behind cover. Targets were chosen carefully. Instead of aiming for thick frontal armor, soldiers aimed at weaker spots such as side armor, tracks, or engine compartments. Often, the goal was not to destroy the tank completely but to disable it. A damaged track could stop a tank and make it vulnerable to other weapons. Firing the rifle revealed the shooter's position. The loud blast and dust cloud made concealment difficult. Enemy forces often responded immediately with machine gun or artillery fire. Despite the risks, many soldiers trusted the boy's rifle during the early years of the war. It gave them at least a chance against armored vehicles. As the war continued, better anti-tank weapons were developed. Rocket-based weapons like the bazooka and PAT proved far more effective. These new weapons were lighter, easier to use, and capable of defeating heavier armor. Compared to them, the boy's rifle felt outdated. By 1943, most frontline units had stopped using the boy's rifle. Some remained in secondary roles or training units. The rifle was officially withdrawn from service. Not long after, today, the boy's anti-tank rifle is remembered as a weapon of necessity. It was never perfect, and it was never meant to be a long-term solution. However, it played an important role during a critical period. When Britain faced serious threats and lacked better options, the boy's rifle helped fill a dangerous gap. It represents a moment in military history when armies were still learning how to fight mechanized warfare in museums and collections today. The boy's rifle stands as a symbol of early World War II innovation, desperation, and adaptation. It reminds us that technology in war evolves quickly, and weapons that seem powerful today can become obsolete tomorrow.